The preacher's Fort Knox. That is what a filing system is. More than invaluable, it is almost indispensable. We all read. We are impressed by certain facts or figures or ideas or illustrations, but we forget. Like flowered patterns on a frosty window pane, what once charmed or fascinated us vanishes. But with a filing system you can store it all in a safe deposit vault. The click of a camera holds the foam-crested wave forever, and the click of a clipping scissors can hold forever an interesting item that otherwise would have perished. More than one effective sermon has been written with a pair of scissors. I know a priest who, when he was young, was forever cutting out pieces from newspapers and magazines. I suspect he still is. In those days he was tall and thin, so we irreverently dubbed him the Lanky Clipper, feeling that Jody Maggio would not mind. But it was not merely the cut-up part of his character that intrigued us, it was what the squirrel did with all those hoarded nuts. He did not bury them. He arranged them in his filing cabinet. You could go to him if you were pressed, and ask him if he had any material on anything from abortion to judgment, or from Luther to Zacchaeus, and his long tapering fingers would riffle through the manila folders like a harpist flitting over silver strings, and he would smilingly hand you paragraphs, pages, articles. Obviously, the towering advantage of having such a file yourself is that you always have at least kindling wood to start your sermon fire. You have stock on the stove always in readiness for the next pot of homiletic soup. But notice this. Our friend, the Lanky Clipper, did not start clipping during this week for next Sunday's sermon. It was always a long-range deal. He did his reading and his clipping with all future sermons in mind. Will this help me sometime? Then I'll file it. He read and clipped and filed for all possible tomorrows. Now, here is the danger. Priests who start filing, like most enthusiastic beginners, often go overboard. They clip and file all kinds of junk. Well, perhaps better do this than never file at all, for at least you will have begun. But after a while, you will save your predatory scissors or your pirating fingers for the really colorful quote, the truly stabbing statistic, the genuinely apt illustration, the rarely heard anecdote. If I opened the drawer a foot away from this typewriter and showed you my own file, I would not blame you for looking down a scornful nose and shaking a sympathetic head. You might airily dismiss it as looking like the wrath of God, an indictment I hope never to be able to verify. All I actually have is a couple of old shoeboxes, and if shoeboxes ever get dropsy, these are swollen enough to be in the last stages. Crammed into the shoeboxes are rows of small, shaggy envelopes, most of them cornered with the old-fashioned pink 2-cent stamp of the 1920s. Many of these old envelopes are from the letters my mother sent me during the 6 years when I was in the seminary. For me, they've always had a sentimental attachment, the light that still pours down from the long-since-burnt-out star. But as a matter of cold practicality, I advise, if you are starting a file, to invest in some large typing paper-sized manila folders. In our seminary days, we would not dream of asking for such a luxury. In that Spartan time, we made do with what we had. Even when we had to go to town to see the doctor, most of us had to borrow a rabat and Roman collar. We majored in survival and minored in theology, and we were incredibly happy. For sheer delight, no one has ever put clipping and filing in. The same class as skiing down an alpine slope or lofting a crisp 5-iron to a postage stamp green. To be frank, it is an unmitigated nuisance. It is one thing to read the article or the item and to appreciate it, but it is quite another to go to the trouble of scissoring it and dropping it into its proper alphabetical slot. This, more often than not, becomes plain drudgery. Many begin, but few continue. The seed is planted, but it falls among the thorns of laziness and lack of self-discipline. Filing takes a little time and some trouble and a bit of patience and much perseverance. It is something like brushing your teeth. There is no attraction to it and no glamour in it, but it pays off. That annoying need of routine brushing preserves those bicuspids and postpones the day when some dentist will have to say, "Well, there's your shiny new bridge. Now come across." In the same way, the habit of filing away articles will make you happy on that day when you get a sudden request to speak and have very little time to prepare. With a fair filing system, you have been preparing for just such an emergency. Now all you need do is arrange and digest the material already assembled. You will be happily surprised at the savory and nourishing meal you can whip up from the victuals in the file's deep freeze. Along with the file might go what you could call a pulpit diary. This does not mean a day-to-day account of your life, a la Pepys or Boswell. How many people begin diaries and leave off in late January? Some men get rich on unused pages of diaries, as other men get rich on the mustard left on dinner plates. For most of us, a daily entry asks too much of poor human nature, whose engine knocks so badly ever since original sin. What is suggested here is to have a kind of preaching journal in which you take the time to set down any unusual incident in your priestly life which could profitably be used in some sermon. At the time when an unusual incident happens, we are all atwitter with the excitement of it, but in a couple of weeks the memory has blurred and vanished. Yet it is precisely these personal episodes that can give color and liveliness and immediacy to a man's talks. Small adventures, yes, but your very own, and they engrave the benchmark of sterling truth on your message. It is the gospel, according to you. This may be the place to apologetically offer advice that borders on the insulting. When preaching, never tell an incident as having happened to you if it did not. There is such a thing as poetic license, but preaching has not become that broad-minded yet, and the results are sometimes embarrassing. I am thinking, for instance, of a priest who was conducting a mission in a large parish. He preached Sunday night, and had them on the edge of their benches with a wild and woolly adventure that had all but turned his hair white. Monday morning, the second missionary arrived to help with the services, and on Monday evening he told the very same tale, only he told it as having happened to him. From then on, the credibility gap became the Grand Canyon. Finally, a preacher's toolbox should contain a set of index cards. A man can have the wealth of the Indies, but what does it avail if he cannot immediately lay his hand on the diamond pin or the ruby ring he wants at that moment for that particular occasion? Let us say your particular wealth consists, first, of a few volumes of your own sermons. By volumes, I mean loose-leaf books. Half the size of ordinary typing paper is the most convenient. Then you have your filing system and your preaching diary. The reason I strongly recommend the latter is perhaps because I never had one. But if I were to begin again, I certainly should. Mark each sermon book A, B, C, D, etc. Number the pages all the way through. Call your filing collection X and your preaching diary Y, and number all its pages too. The card index will be a series of cards in alphabetical order touching all the topics you have in your filing system. In time, it ought to read something like abortion, abstinence, Advent, Bible, blasphemy, canonization, church, confirmation, death, drink, and so on. Suppose we stop at that last one, drink. Suppose further the gospel is about the wedding feast of Cana, and you feel that a talk on the abuse of liquor would be appropriate. So you flip through your card index to drink. If you have been out a few years and have been dutifully doing your homework, that card might look like this. Drink. Decoded, it means that if you go to Sermon Book B, you will find there the talk you gave on January 1919. X merely reminds you that if you go to your file, you will find material under drink. Possibly you used some of this in the preceding sermon. Probably there is more there that you never used. Y65 tells you to go to your preaching journal on page 65 for some personal experience about the abuse of liquor, the deterioration perhaps of a close friend, the bitterness in a family, and so on. So you have at least the ingredients of a talk. All this, I fear, is framing the obvious with neon lights, but I prefer to risk being painfully obvious rather than being irritatingly obscure. At least I mean well.